a land so far. I was caught and I was brought here from Africa. I'm a slave from a land so far. I was caught and I was brought here from Africa. Well, it was licks like fire from the white slave master every day. I down on my knees, weeks and weeks before we crossed the seas to reach in the West Indies. And then they make me work.
Yes, I work.
I said I work.
Yes, I work.
Good
Lord, no pay.
I toil,
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 toil, toil,
toil.
hard each day.
I'm dying. I'm crying, my God. Ooh, oh, well, Lord, I want to be free. Cha. Many times I wanted to run, but the English slave master standing there with the gun, the gun, the gun. Oh, I know he gonna shoot to kill. So I stay and I pray, but I'm planning still. Yes, I study night and day how to break away. I got to make a brilliant escape. But every time I think about the whip and them dogs, my body that start to shake. He make me work.
Yes, I work.
I said I work.
Yes, I work.
Oh Lord,
Lord, no pay.
I toil,
Toil,
I toil,
toil,
I toil,
toil,
I toil, I toil
hard each day.
I'm dying. I'm oh Lord, I wanna be free. In my heart, there was much to say, and I hope that the boss would have listened to me someday. Although he knew my request was small, it was the sting and the whip there to answer me when I called. We had to chant and sing to express our feeling to that wicked and cruel man. That was the only medicine to make him listen. And it's so calypso began. He made me work.
Yes, I work.
I work.
Yes, I work.
Oh Lord,
Lord, no pay.
I toil, I toil, I toil, I toil,
hard each day.
I'm dying, oh Lord. Crying to my God. Well, Lord, I want to be free, my God. And then times change in so many, many, many ways. Till one day, somebody said, free the bloody slaves. I was then put out on the street. I had no clothes, I had no food, I had no place to sleep. Lord, I had no education, no particular ambition. This I cannot conceal. Forgot my native culture. I live like a vulture. From the white man I had to steal because he made me work.
Yes, I work.
I work.
Yes, I work.
Oh Lord,
No pay.
time,
Toil,
time,
toil, toil, toil. Hard each day.
I'm dying. Oh Lord, I want to be free.
Good evening. Oh Lord, I want to be free. Emancipation. That's the meaning of emancipation. Freedom. The mighty sparrow, King Sparrow, whatever you call him, he's the greatest of them all. Not just the greatest Calypsonian. For me, is the greatest singer of the 20th century, any genre. He Only a Fool Breaks His Own Heart, a ballad. He sang that ballad. That's his bestseller. not one of his calypso. Only a Fool Breaks His Own Heart. That was his bestseller. The Mighty Sparrow. Good evening. Well, it's good to be back with you. We've been gone for an entire week. Well, you know, it was Emancipation Week, and we had our observances in Buxton, which was not a one-day thing. We started last Tuesday, and we had events right through to Sunday, and we're taking a break, and then later on this month we have a couple more events. But you know, these days when you are part of organizing these things, it's a lot of work because the pool of activists has shrunk considerably. So many of us have to work more than we often would have done in the past. So we are here and we're ready to go. So many of you have been inquiring about when we would restart. Well, we're here this evening and we are ready to roll. Lots of events in the last week. This year, Emancipation was perhaps the most watched for a number of reasons, and we'll flesh those out as we go on through the week. Today was the death anniversary of Fox Burnham. The People's National Congress had an event at the Seven Ponds in the Gardens, remembering Burnham, who died 39 years ago. 39 years ago. For all you Burnhamites, PNCites, the rest of us, we remember Burnham with you, his contributions and his towering presence in Guyanese politics then and also now. We are also, as some of you may know, mourning the loss of a young man who was elevated to the position of a government minister when he was 25 years old. Dr. Simpson De Silva, who passed away this week. I know tonight there is a night of reflections. I don't say week these days, you know. A night of reflections. It's a week at Itpadaji's offices, headquarters, because he was very active in Itpadaji, very active in the formation and the survival of that organization. Dr. Simpson De Silva died this past week. The funeral is going to be on Saturday at the church in Golden Grove, and then to Lancaster on the quarantine where he was born. He will go back there to lie with his ancestors. We offer our condolences to his family, his friends, in this hour of grief. As we say in the villages, everyday souls are passing away. Everyday souls are passing away. Somebody's dying every day. As we live, so we must die. But, you know, death is never an easy thing. It's never an easy thing to accept. I just learned one of my classmates sit down in bench with him at school, right through high school, law professor Stephen Plass, died suddenly 2 or 3 days ago. Left all of us in shock. All of us in shock. The man was, if you all think I got a laugh, his laugh was out of this world. Condolences to his family. All right, so tonight, what are we going to do tonight? Tonight we are going to continue to do battle. At the symposium, the EUC Kwayana annual symposium, Emancipation Symposium, held in Buxton, put on by the First of August movement. Of course, the topic, for those of you who tuned in and those of you who did not tune in because it was carried live, the topic, of course, was identity and resistance in the context of state-sponsored racism, and also other forms of racism, as they would say in the villages, as they say in the villages. In a nutshell, what to do about state-sponsored racism against African Guyanese. What to do. Because resistance is fighting back. How do you fight back? And what does identity have to do with that? And we had a very large, I think we had 8 presenters, and I know at least 3 presenters, Takumu Gunse, Eric Phillips, and Dr. Henry Jeffrey, said one of the things that we've got to fight back with is to change the political system, change the electoral system, move away from winner-take-all, change the Constitution to ensure that at the end of elections, win or lose, African people do not go through what they are going through right now. And for that matter, no ethnic group must go through what they're going through right now. Or put another way, to stop the PPP from doing again what it's doing now. In fact, to stop any government from doing what it's doing now. That was the question that the presenters interpreted us to be posing in Buxton. And I said at least 3 of the presenters dealt with that issue. And we came away from that symposium on Sunday night with that on the lips of those who were there and the others who were not there. Many people called me over to speak after the symposium and to ask, what next? What next? What next? Well, Dr. Henry Jeffrey is here. He's a regular, and he was very vociferous, as he has always been. It's not a new issue to him. And as he likes to say, he was not always there, but he has been converted. And since he's been converted, he has become probably the loudest and most consistent voice, arguing. We talk about winning, and he always asks, what if you lose? What if you lose? So Dr. Jeffrey's here, and we are ready to roll. Good evening, Dr. Jeffrey.
Good evening, David, and thank you again. First of all, thank you for the invitation to be at the symposium, and it was well attended. And thank you for having me here with your audience that are always with you. And I think I heard that they are growing.
Yes. But let's move straight into it because I think you set the tone um yesterday on Sunday at the symposium, and the question of constitutional reform, the question of winner takes all and that going away, and the question to us on our side as we prepare for election, what if you lose? What if you lose? And so I want to start by asking you, because you said very clearly that the constitutional reform should not wait until after election, is that it's something to be done now. How critical, how critical is this issue of getting rid of winner take all? How critical is it for South African Guyanese, because they're in the opposition, and then for our nation in general?
David, the present constitution allows more or less allows the PPP to do what it's doing now. And it might be breaking the law in certain respects, but it is allowed to do it in terms of what the Constitution allows. No, there's not, well, let me put it another way. Democracy is not majority rule, David. Democracy is majority rule acceptable to all of us. Let me give you an example of what I mean. If you look at Britain today, the government of Britain only won 34% of the total votes. But according to what agreed by them, majority rule meant essentially just that. First past the post in every constituency does not necessarily translate to what we will call majority rule in the country as a whole. Majority democracy is majority rule agreed upon by substantially all of us and then put in law. Democracy is the rule of law. The rule of law. If you look at, remember, Hillary Clinton got more votes than Donald Trump. And yet, he won the election in, I think, 2016 or whatsoever. If you should go to Barbados today and say, let's join, and they said, yes, guys, we must join them, you believe Barbadians would agree to majority rule over everything? Not at all. They will want certain things, certain vetoes and all that Guyanese can do, or else Guyanese would just go and run roughshod over them if it was a nationalist experiment. So what we must understand is that this constitution we have did not work. And in 1997, coming down to the 2000s, we had constitutional reform. This was only because Desmond Hoyt and the PNC decided that it is not working. So we went and made plenty changes. We put in place all sorts of a committee. But you know the biggest mistake that was made? All those committee was left in terms of majority rule, in terms of overall majority rule. And the result is that all the the government of the day, don't say the PPP, they were essentially government of the day for the time, had to do was sit down and say, well, let them talk, let them talk. They can even give you some committees in which you are chairman and whatsoever. But those are subcommittees. They have to come to Parliament. And who controls the Parliament? The person with the majority. So the Constitution by 2000, I think by 2004 or so, I realized that it was nonsense. It needed to change.
2002.
2002. He decided it was nonsense and need to be changed. And constitutions, if you go to Switzerland and these places, constitutions are changed ever so often. Constitution can be changed. It is nonsense because it not do what he thought it was intended to do, and by which time he himself says that he comes to believe in shared governance. The question now, the Constitution is not working, not for us, and according to the PPP, not for them. If the PNC was in office today, who gives the PNC the right? As I've always said, I've written it at the time, so nobody can say that this is Jeffrey coming up now with this. Why? How can they sit down at the time that they're going to Christmas time knock out 7,000 young people or whatsoever? It's a large number. Who gives them the right? The Constitution, but there was a one-seat majority, just like the PNC. You are destroying some people at that time who believe that you intend to destroy them anyway because of how we have been brought up and the ethnic. We have all the Indians have been brought up in developing and building the PPP to defend them, and we have built going with the PNC essentially to defend us against ethnic divisions. So you can do that with a one-seat majority. So the PPP comes now and do all sorts of things with a one-seat majority. It shouldn't happen. You need to be at the table, or you need to find other means of doing this. Look at Suriname as we talk about. Suriname is a multi-ethnic society, not a bicommunal multi-ethnic society, because that is more problematic. But in Suriname now, to become president, you have to get 62%, 63% of the vote, 2/3 majority. To be president in Suriname, you have to get 2/3 majority of the parliament supporting you. That means when you become president, you can't do all sorts of nonsense. Because to get 2/3 of a majority, given their ethnic configuration, to get 2/3 majority, you will almost have to get one of the other parties and large ethnic parties. So we need to do other things. This society cannot keep going on with this kind of thing. Now, it should happen before any elections, because as you mentioned, I always said, and I said it to Mr. Norton after his speech, I said, and what if you lose? What if you lose? If you lose, the PPP gone back and maybe become more vicious than they are today, because they are doing anything they want. They are now trying to destroy any institutions you have. And if their interest was in African Guyanese, they would have learned, as I said at the symposium, they would have long gone and done an ethnic disparity analysis and show that we are talking nonsense. But we are not talking nonsense. They have increased capital works by 50%, and they have diminished the salaries that government workers must get by 50%, but they increase one. Who are the most contractors in Guyana? Who? It is the Indian community. And therefore, it is there who are benefiting from this. And because your people depend on government services and they have smashed their salaries, the pittance they were giving. Because I can remember I was ministering in around 2004 when the teacher's salary was 3.4 of GDP. Go and count that up now. Of course, they wouldn't want to give you that now, given the GDP, because that would be the starting wages of American teachers, as a matter of fact, about 45,000 US dollars. But the point is, but they wouldn't want to give that. But look what it is, pittance, because it's not oil caused this. Don't make nobody tell you about oil and oil causes. This was happening for the longest while, since about 2000. 2002, this has been going on. What it has allowed the PPP to do is to have more resources to spread to their communities and to bribe your people. That is what is allowed. But it's not an oil problem, because if any countries that are configured as bicommunal societies around the world have a similar kind of problem, and you got to solve it. And there's only one way to solve this. It's by shared governance or dictatorship. And what you have now is dictatorship by the PPP. So that is why it is of vital importance that you don't want to know elections and hope to win. 22% of the people in this country, only 22%, believe that governments in Guyana has been chosen by the people. 22, and this is not me. So this is the International Republican
IRI.
Mm-hmm. They said that. So don't worry this thing, and then propagandists for the PPP and the different newspapers talk about, they won. These elections are highly manipulated. Between 2011 and 2020, the electoral list in Guyana rose from 475% to 660 people. It is over nearly 200 people, 200,000 people.
1,000.
Tell me where Guyana population is stagnating almost. So these elections are manipulated. Now, so unless Mr. Norton knows how to really manipulate the election, because he's not, the truth is that you have to this change before election, or you have to start the process so people know where you're going. You have to start the process. You think the PPP wanted any constitutional reform when Desmond Hoyt was opposition leader? No. But how they bring it? Because Desmond Hoyt went on the streets at the end of the day. That is not what we should attempt to do. But we should certainly begin by putting forward something. You can't say the PPP never wanted. Who cares what the PPP want? A lot of things in democracy people don't want. If they don't want to reason, what are you going to do about that? Because that is the reason. You can't show me anywhere else in the world that anything else around. That's reason. If they don't want to reason, what are you going to say there like it? We're going to live on unreason and dictatorship? And I am at a loss to see that they just don't have the belly of people like Desmond Hoyt, or they know something I don't know. But anything they know, the Europeans also know. Because in their report, as I also said, they pointed out They pointed out between 2015 and 2020, under the PNC, the electoral list rose 15.8%. And in Region 1 by 30%. So they are well aware of what is going on. We got to be very careful. Unless we want to continue like this for the rest, our leaders have got to determine what they want before election. Even if they had to go to elections without it, they must say what they want before and commit to it before. Not sit down and wait to tell us they're going to win this election. As I always say, what if you lose? You leave your people in what we used to call it in the days, David, pocketery.
Pocketery. Pocketery. And if you're African Guyanese, you know exactly what we are talking about. No matter how we twist it and turn it, no matter how we tell you that Indians are suffering and Amerindians are suffering, the truth of the matter is that African Guyanese are targeted for special kind of action by this government, understandably so. If you go by the logic of ethnic and political domination, if you're dominating, you have to dominate against all other groups, especially the groups that are against you. And we saw in this just concluded emancipation observances how ruthless the PPP is in terms of domination. They went into every major locale, African locale, that holds emancipation events, and they organize a competing event. The only place they didn't go to was Buxton. And the reason they didn't go to Buxton is because they couldn't bribe those of us. It so happens that people like myself happen to be, and be modest here, I am leading the emancipation observances in Buxton, and they can't come to me and bribe me. So they couldn't bribe Buxton. And so what they did was not give Buxton any government money that they had been given for the last 20 years because we were not bribable. But they went to Hope Town. They went to New Amsterdam. They went to Georgetown. And they viciously organized alternative events on emancipation. Could you imagine Burnham? Could you imagine Burnham, who they said so bad? Can you imagine Burnham going into Indian communities and organizing alternative events, and he going there on Diwali and Pagwa and speaking? But that's what the PPP has done this past week. Dr. Jeffrey, your thoughts on that?
Well, as you rightly say, that both the theory and practice of our kinds of community or country says that is two ways of going about this in a democratic way. The Americans, the minute Biden came to office, indeed it's not even Biden, because it couldn't have been Biden, because the people who the U.S. aide who wrote the thing on Guyana, it came under Trump. So the U.S. aide said that, look, you have to have a more inclusive shared government. They didn't say shared government, but they said you have to get rid of the winner-take-all political system and have a more inclusive governance. Now, that's under Trump, and that's what the PPP seem not to understand. They believe if Trump wins, they're going to be better off. But Guyana is a generational problem. and it can't be dealt with. Americans are stupid to believe they're going. Parties are not stupid to believe they're going to be in power for all times. So they develop generational policies towards this country, Northern Ireland. When Clinton, all right. So Clinton and Biden and them, they got Northern Ireland to have a similar type of outcome, shared governance and all that. But when Trump come, he did it. When Bush come, he continued with it. Indeed, when they was messing around with Brexit, Trump sent a delegate to tell them, don't mess around with the Good Friday Agreement, because they're going to mess around with Northern Ireland. So if they think that because the Democrats are gone, the situation has changed, it didn't start under the Democrats. It started under the Republicans. So effectively, they have to do what the PPP is doing, what these people normally do to try. In countries like ours, that's what's happening. It's the dictatorship that's instilling itself. The PPP is an autocratic government. They talk about majority rule. They talk about democracy and one in the election. Well, Maduro win election too. So, I mean, so it is of vital importance that we understand what we are doing. Don't get caught up in this old notion of simply winning, because even if you win, you can't win by more than 1 or 2 seats. And you win by 1 or 2 seats, what gives you a right to try to rule autocratically or even democratically a people? 48% of the country that is against you. The truth is, democracy is majority rule agreed to by all of us. It's the rule of law. It is not simply majority rule. Go anywhere, you will find us not so. It's not majority rule. This is a PPP keeps saying this nonsense here long enough for people to believe. But it's not simple. And if we go, and you've been talking about Burnham and so on, now we know a lot of things we didn't know then. Because if you ask me, indeed, I did a piece for British Biden. I said Burnham must be in heaven. Because like he stopped us from PPP using their ethnic majority, because they had it then, they don't have it now, all of us are minority, to take us into the Soviet camp. It's not I saying. They wrote a letter to the Comintern and say, we're going to connect not only Ghana, on the whole Caribbean into the communist camp. You think that the Americans got hold of their letter, of course, because the CIA must be all over the place. And the Americans will get rid of the PPP. They do everything. And you cannot blame them. It's one time when it is democracy, majority rule must never allow to rule, is when majority rule is structured in that kind of a way and intend to get rid of democracy. Because if you're going to take us into a Marxist-Leninist thing, that's certainly no democracy. And that was the intent of the PPP, to use the Indian majority to do just that. The Americans were. I'm not saying this now. I was telling Chadijigan that all the time I ever knew him. But I didn't have the evidence that comes out now to say he sent a letter to the people. I was just arguing to say to him, the things you've been doing, walking around the world and supporting all sorts of dictatorship and coming here, communist dictatorship, and coming here and tell us how you don't talk to me about that. I buy it. I don't buy it. But today we know that they wrote a letter to the Comintern in Czechoslovakia, and they all part the information, saying, please give us help to take Guyana and the Caribbean into the Marxist-Leninist mode too. If one for Barnum, we might have been living a gulag. I mean, and when you talk about the Caribbean leaders, you think America pass the information to them too? Not they want to tell them how they got it, but they're going to tell them we are assured, because they can't tell them how they get it, because then that would open a whole story for how they get it indeed in terms of CIA. And now we know that. So all this thing about Barnum.
We seem to have lost Dr. Jeffrey there for a minute. He's going to come back on. I think he may have hit one of the buttons there as he was about to make a point. Good evening to all of you who've joined us. Please still share the link we're on. I know we've been gone for a week, but been so busy with emancipation. And as I was saying before Dr. Jeffrey came in, is that the PPP went to every major African village and community and put on alternative events or bribe or give the people in those villages who were doing events and took control of those events. From Hopetown to Belladrum to New Amsterdam to Georgetown to Den Amstel to Mocha. They went to those communities. They either put on alternative communities, Emancipation Day. I was in New Amsterdam, and they had an alternative event there. They were all over Hopetown. I understand that in Belladrum, they took control of the event there. The only place they didn't put on an alternative event or take control of the event is Buxton. And the lesson there is that you have to defend your communities. And we were able to defend our communities because we had strong leaders. I would never, ever take their money and their bribe, or I would never sit quiet by and allow them to come in my village and put on alternative events. That's what strong leadership is. And we have to develop those leaderships in our communities. This is critical. They gave us 500,000 last year. They decided they ain't going to give me this year. We neither bow, nor we open the gate and allow them to come in. We fight. And you all help us to fight because you all contributed to all the events that we put on. That's how you fight. Sometimes we have to fight. We don't necessarily fight with boots on the ground. But this fight is always going on. It's a silent fight. The one place they couldn't come and bribe us, the one place they couldn't come and put on alternative events is my village. That we in the WPA gave leadership to Buxton and said, we are going to do this without your bribe, and we are going to mobilize our people to ensure that no alternative nothing is being held in our village. And I have to say that the political parties, I had to fight some people in my camp who said that I'm turning a cultural thing into a political thing. And I'm sure some of them will say, I make government money and come. So don't believe we didn't have a fight in Buxton. But sometimes you have to leave people behind. Because we can only sing and dance. We have to sing, dance, and fight at the same time. Emancipation is about politics. Emancipation is not play. We sing, we dance, we eat, we kanki, drink, we mabi, and we fight. We fight. That is why on Emancipation Eve, as we rung in emancipation, we had the two, some will say three, but I'm being modest there. We have the two major political leaders. They were there in Buxton. And they came onto the stage and we held hands in a show of unity. The PPP is smarting. They're going crazy. They're asking Norton, and they suddenly become supporters of Norton and Nigel Hughes. They're asking Norton and Hughes, how can they allow the weakest link to bring them together? They're referring to me and the WP as the weakest link. They're going crazy because they didn't want to see that show of unity. They want us to fight each other. So they're telling Norton and Nigel Hughes, beware, because the weakest link, how can you all make the weakest link bring you all together? And my answer to one of them who drew the PPP propaganda to my attention, I said, maybe it's not the weakest link. Maybe, just maybe, what you all calling the weakest link is not the weakest link. And so, sisters and brothers, we're up against a vicious group of people. And our message has to be very, very clear. My message is clear. Very clear. This thing that Indian people are not benefiting from the people, they are benefiting. They are benefiting. The Indian elite is benefiting more, but the Indian masses are benefiting. They're benefiting more than Africans and Amerindians. But we're talking, I'm an African, I'm talking about African. They're benefiting more than Africans. And we have to talk about the marginalization and the exclusion about Africans, we African leaders. You see, they want us to talk about all these other things. I think Dr. Jeffrey may have had blackout or something. I think that may be the case. They want us to talk about everything, but they do not want us to talk about African marginalization. They don't want us to talk about that. They're saying that myself and the WPA, we are what they call ethnic right wing. We are ethnic right wing. I don't care what wing they put me in. I am very clear in my mind that African people are being oppressed more than other peoples. And I am leading a response to that marginalization at the political level. We're not only fighting with politics, we have to fight with culture, we have to fight at all levels. There are other organizations, there are Black organizations, ACDA and Coffee 250 and others. I happen to belong to Coffee 250, and we'll be having our forum. Dr. Jeffrey's back. We'll be having our forum, Coffee 250, in another 2 weeks, week and a half. Look out for that. But we have got to fight back against this domination. And as we're saying, these elections are critical. But it's not just about going to the election. It's about fighting to ensure that after the election, we are not left in this position that we are in now. And the PPP or any government that win any party that win 50% and won should be allowed to do what the PPP is doing. So yes, we are not done playing elections. All we are saying, we're asking the question that Jeffrey asks. If you lose, we know if we win. But as the brothers have said, even if we win, the PPP would have done so much damage, or they would have dominating the economy to such a point that if you win the politics, you have to deal with the economic might of the PPPs, the PPP supporters. Dr. Jeffrey, you're back.
Yeah, yes. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. If you believe in the spirit, they will say bad spirits descend.
Bad spirit,
bad spirits. Dr. Jeffrey, we just had elections in Venezuela, and those Venezuelan elections are important for us, even as they were important for Venezuela.
Yeah.
So we had a situation there where Maduro claimed that he won 51% of the vote. The Americans said he didn't win. Other interest groups said he didn't win. But our Caribbean is split on whether he win or didn't win. Guyana's friends, or the friends of this government, in particular, St. Vincent Gonzalez and Mia Mottley in Barbados, seem to be leaning to say Maduro won. But when it came to Guyana in 2020, they also came down and said the PPP won. So we seem to be part of a scenario, Venezuela, Guyana, and the rest of the Caribbean, that is much more complex than meet the eye. Help us to untangle some of this.
Well, first of all, it has something to do with the aid Venezuela is giving to the islands. And I am not certain that I hear Motley said clearly that Venezuela won.
Abstain.
Yeah, she seemed to be dodging the bullet. But the point is, I mean, she's got other ambitions, and to say Venezuela win would to put a spoke in that ambition immediately once the Americans speak. But the truth is that the situation become more precarious for Guyana as it stands. I can understand, because if I had anything to do with this, Guyana would cloak itself in a CARICOM thing, and whatsoever CARICOM determine, Guyana would determine. That would be the best way for us to go with this issue. But it puts us in a more precarious situation, because just as when Maduro was trying to win the election, he used Guyana to try to mobilize the forces. Now that he's got a lot of forces against him, he might try to use Guyana to bring them to his side. You see, you got to watch it very much, because now one of the few things ordinary Venezuelans, not the opposition leadership now, but ordinary Venezuela, is that Guyana belongs to them. And Maduro might start saying, under pressure, might start saying, "Boy, we gotta do something about this Essequibo that we turn into a state." Then we might bring over some people by us, because we might be forced. They might have, the opposition would get forced now to go and tell them it is not so. If one party had won, and there was some agreement of who won or lost, well, that would have been the end, because he tried to use Guyana to win support. He did not get enough support, and whatsoever happened, he lost. Well, that would have been the end of the matter. But now he's got another interest in using Guyana, maybe to bring some of the people that support over there to look. So Guyana got to be very careful at this point of time. They have to be mobilized. They have to be mobilized when I mean that in every fashion. Militarily, such that they could do. Diplomatically, got to be the major point of has always been and continue has to be the major point of activity. So I think that we are in a precarious situation again. Just as he wanted to use those people for election, he perhaps might start saying, if I can do this, they'll ease the pressure on me in Guyana. You know, it's like they have to come to some compromise in that country. They have to come to some compromise in the country, and the Americans and the Europeans and the people who has power to do that, I think will have to look at it. I'm going to tell you something, you know. What happened in Venezuela, I doubted that it could have happened because I said they got the most oil in the world, they got all these things. I mean, how can this possibly be what I'm being told here? Because one American secretary told me personally that if they continue like this, they will become the smallest. They will become small and vulnerable indeed. Venezuela was trying to join the small and vulnerable economies that since maybe 2008. And I was having a discussion with one, and I was told that. They will be, and look what's happening. The population, they're all over the place. I would never have thought. When they said it, I said, that can't happen. Venezuela got all the most oil and everybody in the world. Look what has happened. Look what has happened. So you got to have some sort of discourse there. But the discourse there is not like the discourse here. You gotta have a discourse here, but not like the discourse here. The discourse there is a discourse about elite protection. You understand? Largely, it's about the elite that's been there for so long and has maybe do all manner of things, now feel that they're going to suffer badly if Maduro lose. But army and all of them. So it's not anything to do no big socialism. What's socialism? Where is that going? You can't have all your people running all over the place on top. Socialism, there's no world socialism anymore. So you'll have to get some sort of reconciliation, so make some concessions to the elites and so on. Here is a different story. It's an ethnic thing. It's far more difficult than what they have to face over there. And that's why you can say you need some form of shared governance and all of that. We are more like Northern Ireland, like Fiji, like Malaysia, like Israel. You see how difficult that is? You got some Israel, the Jews who has even declared the state a Jewish state. Netanyahu declared it in law. That is a Jewish state. And he went to the court, and the Supreme Court, and they said, yes, it is a Jewish state. God is more like that. It's a perennial ethnic problem. It's not like what you have in Maduro, you got to placate the army and all of them and give some sort of concession around that road. That's how I see it anyways. So, but God got to be very, very much on its toes, because the election is over, but they can still come into play if Maduro wants to try to win back some of the supports on the road against you.
Speaking about Maduro and the Venezuelan elections here, Dr. Henry Jeffrey. Dr. Jeffrey, you know, this constitutional reform coming back to Guyana and moving away from winner take all. Really, it's about convincing the political elites. And at the symposium, a lot of fingers were pointing in the direction of the PNC. I want to say categorically here on this show that we in the Working People's Alliance are ready for constitutional reform. We are prepared to make it a centerpiece going forward. We are not opposed to elections as a form of change in governments and so forth, but we are very clear in our minds that elections within the context of winner-take-all is very, very problematic. And so therefore I want to say categorically here that we are for a change in the winner-take-all system before elections. I want to say that categorically here. We still have two other parties in the opposition that have not yet made it very clear where they stand. From your understanding, from working with you know, in the PNC at a lower level than you work in the PPP, but in terms of the PNC and the AFC, what do you think is causing the hesitancy?
Well, first of all, Nigel used to make these same sort of noises.
Yeah.
Nigel is a man who used to say, you gotta get 60% for this, 50%, 60% to pass bill, 60%. But suddenly, you're not hearing that from him no more. I mean, it's a thing. I mean, he was more in this shared governance business than anyone else in the AFC. The AFC was never there. The AFC was essentially thinking, when the AFC formed, it formed. Yeah. I think it's David Icaris decided. I think he was one of the major thing there, trying to bring back Burnham and Jacob from the 1950s, bring Stratman and thing together and all that and all that and all of that. So that was formed to think that you can run the system on the same principles that it has always been run. And India going to leave PPP and this one going to leave PNC and there's go up. But then but even Burnham thought so. For most of his life, he thought so too. He thought that, I can win over Indians and win over. It proved that it is not as simple as that. They did not properly grasp the nature of, although Arthur Lewis wrote this thing in West Africa, he wrote it since when?
1965.
1965. So effectively, they thought it was, when people tell you, we always believe in shared government, it's how you believe in it, because it's not simple to say, I believe in shared governance. It's saying that you must see it almost as an obstacle, and you can't do without it in the context of a place like Guyana, Northern Ireland, and all of that. It's not just belief and if it doesn't come this year, it's gonna come next year, and that sort of a thing. So yes, it is what David has to happen in this country. There's no, man, we've been at this for 70 years almost. Mm-hmm. We fooled ourselves that it was Burnham was the problem. I was speaking to Burnham when the thing came off. But as I said, look what Burnham maybe prevent from happening. Chedi Jagan could say, let's take Guyana into a communist fall. The communists, what we going to live? Or perhaps we will live like Cuba, not Vietnam, whatever. No. And it is quite clear that if the one time that you can stop majority rule, if its majority rule is intended to destroy majority rule as a whole. And that's precisely what Jagan was attempting. Because when he take us into any communist democratic centralist mode, well, we know what happened there. No majority rule. And therefore the Americans were totally correct to stop him. As I said, I used to tell him that all the time. All the time I know Jagan citizen. So I telling him that. But I didn't know that he had written something and the Yanks get it. And the Yanks must share it with all of Caribbean leaders, not in terms of who say, but we have information that there's the intent. And they rightly too said, no, Cherry, and that thing. So when you run around blaming Caribbean leader for not intervening, Guyana would rig the election. They got a right to rig election. If that's what it takes to keep Jagan and people taking you into some communist, Marxist, Leninist mode, it was the right thing. But you couldn't say that because they didn't have the information. But now you have it. So when they keep saying that, I say, well, they grew up with it, maybe, and it's nice to talk about who rigged election or whatever. But if it wasn't for Barnum, God knows who might happen in Guyana. And you might have to go in the bush and fight some, take off in the bush again and fight something like the slaves used to do, fight Jagan communist government.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey here talking about the need for constitutional reform before elections. And it was a view that was shared by almost all the panelists at the EUC Guyana Emancipation Symposium held on Sunday. Dr. Jeffrey, as usual, it's always a pleasure having you on, and I will see you in 2 weeks' time.
Yes, and thank you, David. I hope you press your boys. You got a party, I do have a party. You have a party, press the chaps, and let's try to get something on the road. Let's at least put something on the table and say, this is it. Just don't say, but PPP don't want it. The PPP, all people don't want anything like that. I didn't wait to hear the PPP didn't want it. If he had waited, he never would get it. So, press your chops, David.
All right. I hear you. Dr. Henry Jeffrey there asking me, of course, to talk to the other two leaders who we had in Buxton on that stage, and we held hands in a show of unity. And the question now, do we go to an election in which the PP is already starting to rig big time? What do we do between now and election? What do we do? As I said, categorically, the WPA, the party which I belong to, we are very clear that we are for elections. That's not about going in some mountain and fighting some gorilla thing. We accept elections as the way forward, as the way to change governments and govern the society, but we want elections that would lead to the security of all the people. As we speak, Black people, African Guyanese, have no security, no political or economic or cultural security in Guyana under this government. And I stress cultural because at emancipation, that's what the PPP did. They sought to remove our cultural security. Emancipation was being yanked away from us under our eyes. And some of our people colluded with it. Could you believe the PPP went into Hope Tongue at their soiree and almost take it over? They set up something competing in Georgetown. In New Amsterdam, I was at New Amsterdam, something competing, Belladrum. They literally take it over from what I heard there. And I've been going to Belladrum now for the last 2 or 3 years. They went into Mocha, went into thing. The one place that they didn't go into was Buxton. The one place that they couldn't bribe was Buxton. They may have bribed some people in Buxton to put on an alternative event, but they didn't try that in Buxton. And they couldn't bribe the organizers in Buxton because the WPA gave leadership to Buxton. Here is the story. Here is the story. Our political parties have to give leadership to our Black communities. Not just asking for you all vote, but to be there as a barricade. Last year, the Prime Minister office called to say that he's coming to speak. And he will speak last because they give you $500,000. And I said, no, you're not coming there to speak. Not just to say you're speaking last. And so they decide, oh, so we ain't giving you no money this year. But I knew. And so we started to raise money here. And I want to thank you all. Though every cent that you all help us with was a boot on the ground. Because what you all didn't know you all were doing is that you all were helping to defend the village against the attackers, the cultural vultures. And the simple thing we did is that we gave political leadership. Because, you know, our people like to sing and dance, and, you know, people come and say, we're going to give you a little money for sing and dance, and they're, you know, they're innocent. I can imagine what happened at Hope Town and all these places. Some of those people are innocent. They really believe that, no, the PPP is not going to do this, they're not going to do that. But I knew. We in Buxton knew what they were up to. And we knew we had to defend our village. And we did that. And we hope that is an example to other villages. We hope that is an example to other villages. I would like to thank all of you who have contributed. And we still have events. We still have events. We still have our competition, our young people, youth, poetry competition, essay competition. We have a business expo coming on later in this month. And so those of you who have not contributed, please feel free to contribute. Some people contributed prizes already for the competition that is coming up. So if you've not contributed, please do. The coordinates are the same. Because know that you use your dollars to beat back some culture vultures. And we defended our village. We defended our village. And Buxtonians came out to that lined up. Some of my own people were telling me, oh God, David, then people don't go listen to no politics thing. They come to see people sing and dance. And I said, yes. And we sang and we danced for 2.5 hours. And when we looked up at 11:30, everybody was seated and standing, waiting for Norton and Nigel Hughes and myself. And they waited until the last word. Our sing and dance people. Our sing and dancing is revolution. That's what we do, to sing and dance revolution. And we have got to change our mindset among our people. This thing that we are malleable, we easy. All you have to do is come and throw a little money in front of us. They know they can come and throw no money in front of me. And they know that once I... And that is what we give to Buxton, leadership. WPA leadership to Buxton and prevent the vultures. And the PPP is blue mad. As I said, they're telling Norton and Nigel Hughes, oh yeah, they're making the weakest link. Weakest link, unity is the answer. Constitutional reform before election. change of the system. After the next election, black people must never be in the position that we are in now. Never. Never. We got to fight to change the rules. And I hope my brother and sister leaders are listening and are ready to take up this mantle. Thank you all again. My love for you all, my love for you all is always constant. Some redundancy there, but we got to do it for emphasis. I'll see you all tomorrow night. When we come again, I think tomorrow night, who we have? We have Kwayana's son on tomorrow night, Kofi Kwayana. Kwayana's son is going to be on tomorrow night. A new addition to our cast. A new addition to our struggle. A new addition to our army. Onward, Christian soldiers. Marching us to war. The cross of Jesus going on before. Like the Lion of Judah, we shall break every chain and win us the victory again and again. We just won a victory in Buxton, and we got spread that to other villages. Protect black people, protect black communities from the vultures. That's my word. We come in tomorrow night again to continue this struggle.